Hi, everyone, and welcome to SpeakuP Monday. I'm your host, Bhavna Parihar, and we're coming to you live from tropical nomad Canggu in Bali, Indonesia. For those joining us for the first time, SpeakuP Monday is the #1 talk show for entrepreneurs and social impact. We believe that people inspire people, and that the more conversations you have, the more perspective you gain, the more compassionate you become. My guest today is both of those things. She is both an entrepreneur and making a social impact. She has a real estate business in Indonesia. As well, she's a co-founder of ADzenTURE Retreats. And most importantly, she's leading a life of self-love and purpose. Her journey has taken her around the globe, both confronting personal and professional setbacks, and we're going to dive in deep and learn from her journey. Please help me welcome Azma Ousmand.
Thank you for having me.
So, like any good story, there is the beginning and how you started. So before you started leading retreats around the world, before you started to embody what it means to live and lead authentically, would love to have you share how you got started, a bit of your background. Take us back to your environment, how you grew up, some of the seeds that were planted.
So I was born in a little island called Sri Lanka. And I moved to Toronto, Canada at the age of 9. So we became immigrants in Canada. And because of that, actually, so that's my parents really instilled values of culture and community at such a young age. Because also I am of Indonesian and Malaysian descent, so 6th and 7th generation. My ancestors were forced out of Indonesia and Malaysia due to colonization during the Dutch War that took place here many, many years ago. And so because we were a minority community in Sri Lanka, it was so important for us to keep the culture alive. And so that's something that my parents, really took on. Even my grandparents had that. And even when we moved to Toronto, Canada, again, of course, we became even more minority. So there were about 300 families. And my parents started, and with the other members of the community, started a community called the Sri Lankan Malays of Toronto. So I was following in their footsteps, and they were leaders in the community, and so they really groomed me to be who I am now. And I was putting together events for the youth of the community at that time. We were doing Indonesian and Malaysian dancing, so we were really trying to keep in touch with our culture and our roots. To ensure that we don't forget that. So that's kind of how I've been, really putting together community events. And from there, I actually, when I moved into university, I was also a student leader of my university. I went to Ryerson. Now it's called the Toronto Metro University. So at Ryerson, under the business school, I was part of the Ted Rogers Management School of Business and the Commerce Student Association, and we were running events and frosh and things like that. But then also we had an opportunity to create this 150-person 3-day national conference and start a legacy there. So that was really cool to be able to be part of that team. So that was, I was starting to get a little taste of startups at that point as well.
So it's almost like you're kind of doing like a mini retreat before you even knew what those were.
Yes.
And starting to plant that foundation. So you're in the youth, you're a student leader, you're kind of helping build community at a very sort of small local level. What happened next? So this is obviously part of your family, your upbringing, your culture to kind of give back and to bring people together. At that time, was there any sort of spark or turning point that you thought this is where I might want to lead in terms of a career, in terms of what I do at an older level?
So I'm going to fast forward here a little, but I'll give a bit of detail. So I ended up moving back to Sri Lanka. It had been a dream of mine to go back to Sri Lanka, experience life as an adult there. Because we had left at 9, so I was really out of touch from the culture and just the island itself. Like I didn't know what the island was. I only grew up at such a young age. There wasn't Facebook then to keep in touch with people then. So I had this dream of going back to Sri Lanka. I was working for Expedia at the time. And it was just, it was also a new job. So Expedia at the time I started, I remember them saying, or in the hiring interview, them asking, what's your 5-year plan? I said, well, I'd love to go to Sri Lanka. I know you guys don't have an office, but I just like planted the seed. And then not even 2 months later, they do this annual conference every year in Vegas. It's an insane party. And I ended up meeting the director of Asia Pacific, and he was building a team in Sri Lanka. I met him. I said, hey, I'm going to be part of your team. You're going to hire me. And 2 months later, I was part of that team. So that did also mean that I had to give up my job, in Canada, and then sign another contract with Expedia in Sri Lanka. So yeah, I took on that. I was like, okay, let's do it. I was married at the time as well, so it was a joint decision. And we decided to go to Sri Lanka, and the stars aligned. I was able to get my dual citizenship at that time too. Everything just like fell into place, or so I thought.
Love it. Good segue. Right. But now, what I'm hearing too, and I think part of this, and we kind of call it like the deep dive, is a deep dive into you as a person, because in terms of you kind of leading and living, you almost have to have gone through those experiences to actually be able to speak from an authentic place and to actually show up for what you do for others. And it sounds like at a very young age, and as a youth, and even kind of demanding sort of what you want for yourself career-wise. You want travel, you want to be international. I hear bold, like you were bold, you were brave, and just for anyone kind of watching who is going to, maybe they're at times wanting something and they haven't yet figured out how exactly to go for it. What made you feel bold? Was that something that you feel was just an innate part of you, or how were you sort of confident enough to actually go up to that person and say, this is where I want to be?
I think it was a part innate, and also I just, I'm not a believer of limits. Like, I do truly believe that we can create what we want in this life. We can create multiple lifetimes in one lifetime, experience multiple lifetimes. So it was just like taking that shot. I'm always a believer in shoot a shot. What's the worst that could happen? Someone saying no to you? Okay, try another door. Open up another door. I just knew that that's something that I wanted to do, and like explore Sri Lanka, and I was gonna do it no matter what. So if it wasn't Expedia, I would have found some other way to do it. But I think, that was really also a big point of knowing that manifestation was true for me. And I say this because for the longest time I had this screensaver, and I didn't even realize it was a screensaver of this beautiful beach in Sri Lanka. And I was like, oh shit, like I was looking at that every day.
You were vision boarding before you even knew what vision boarding was.
Yeah, exactly. So going back to Sri Lanka, now I was there. My husband at the time had just moved over there. And not even 2 months after he moved, we had like the biggest shock of our lives. Just getting real personal here, we faced the death of his mom. And that, of course, threw like, a curveball. Like, okay, like what are we doing? Where do we go from here? And so that I ended up enduring like one of the most difficult points in my life because of that. Also, like learning how to hold space for someone grieving, and also knowing that person. Sometimes people don't want help, and also allowing that space to just allow them to also go through that grief and however they need to, because everyone does grieve differently. But yeah, that was a big challenge. So I kind of, so my husband at the time, he ended up moving back to Canada, and I said to him, I'm going to give up this job that I, signed a contract for, but I'm going to give it up for our marriage, because I thought that was the right thing to do. I had to do what, I committed to these vows.
So I was going to want to talk for a second. When you say right thing to do, why, what kind of conditioning? Is it a cultural, right? I mean, I come from, an Indian immigrant culture, and I know just also, share with us, if you don't mind, like what age you were, because I think a lot of that does play into society norms and cultural norms, and you know, you talk a little bit later about sort of you don't believe in limits and defying them, but at the same time you were trying to, I guess, honor what you thought the culture and society had in mind for you.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I was kind of like the golden child, if you will. My sister might in the audience might agree. But, you know, I did everything by the book. I went to university. I got married very young. I got married at 23, you know, and looking back, like, would I have done that again? Probably not, but it was what I thought I wanted. You know, we were going down that route. I had finished university, and so it was like I had a career starting, and it just felt like the next step. So yeah, that was, you know, and according to culture, the right thing to do was to, you know, fight for this marriage and do what you could to work for this marriage. Because divorce in our culture was a big no. Like, you wouldn't, like, I didn't even know how to, like, bring that upon to my parents, you know?
Well, I'm like, you know, I'm hearing yours, like, you're not even 30 at this point, and you've been married, you're going through a bit of a challenging time in your relationship, you feel you need to honor that relationship. You also have these career aspirations in travel, which you're now saying, I'm going to put on hold. So, you know, was there an element or of shame that you felt you had to sort of, you know, kind of defend yourself against in order to continue to move forward?
Yeah, I mean, there was, but I truly do have very supportive parents. You know, I'm one of the lucky few. I can't say the same for other people in my community. Like, sometimes, a lot of times, you know, they see divorce and separation like as such shameful things. But it's like, why are you ashamed of, oh, two people not working out, so we got to move on. We have a short life. Like, why would I spend, you know, the next like 10 years trying to be with a person that's not, you know, allowing myself to be who I am, you know? So there was a lot of things that way that I just found myself being untrue to myself by staying in that marriage, so.
And when you say, you know, being true to yourself, because I think, as you said, like a relationship, I mean, all of these moments brought you to exactly where you are today, sitting here talking about your journey. I imagine looking back now, knowing that you went through that, and as you said, you had a really supportive family. So maybe shame is more in the element of just society in general, what others may think, friends, but you were, as you said, lucky to have a supportive family, but in that same way now you are in a position to provide that space where others may not have that community. So I mean, on one hand, all of these moments have kind of led you to where you are. So you make the decision because, you know, obviously we now know he's an ex. So you made that decision. So what I know, cliffhanger, what happened now?
I know. Long story short. Well, it was quite a long story because after, you know, the death of his mom, I did tell him to go back to Canada at first, but without me, and I had to at least give this company a year. That's the least I could do for them moving me out, and, you know. So I said, let me stay back for a year, and then we continued to work on our marriage for 4 more years. So I was married in total for 6 years. I was with him all my 20s, and at 29, some call it the Saturn return. Let me tell you, that's true.
Tell us more about this Saturn return.
So, y'all love stories, right? Okay. So it all started. I mean, you know, it was up and down, you know, as relationships are time to time, but it was just too down for me at that point. And I remember I was in Peru, and this was when our business was taking off. So in 2019, we actually were...
So maybe rewind for a bit. So
okay.
Because in this time, just to kind of catch everyone else up
Yes.
here who may not have read the bio or doesn't
Right.
know, you know, the story, that you co-founded ADzenTURE in 2017.
Yes.
So before we get into that piece in Peru, can you help bridge that gap between
Right.
when you left Expedia and you kind of made that corporate switch,
Yeah,
right, to
I did.
decide to become an entrepreneur?
So when I came back to Canada after giving that year in Sri Lanka, during that year in Sri Lanka, I fell in love with the island. I was going through a lot, in my partnership, and how I found solace was in nature. Sri Lanka is a beautiful, beautiful island. If you've never been, please go. It's just so magical, and I found myself healing and just finding moments of mindfulness through being in nature. And also at the time, I was really getting more into my yoga practice. So anyway, I came back to Toronto. At the same time, my business partner, she was living in Australia, and we were friends. We had met on a bachelorette in Mexico many years ago, but we kept in touch, and she moved back at the same time, also was in the same limbo of like, okay, what do we do now? I just knew I didn't want to go back to corporate life. If I wanted to, I could, get something right away, but that would just be the more comfortable thing to do. And I was like, nope.
So, sorry, when you say comfort, what allowed you to go against that comfort, and be uncomfortable with making the switch?
So, although I do say uncomfortable where it's like, okay, I didn't know when my next paycheck was going to go, I will say I did have the comfort of having the support of my husband at the time. So I did, because I, did leave my job for him and our marriage. So I was like, well, I'm going to work on this business. And at the time, I was actually working on a business to promote travel in Sri Lanka. So I was because I had all these contacts, I was looking at creating a travel company to promote Sri Lanka and take people there to experience Sri Lanka the way I had experienced over that last year. And so that was happening, and then at the same time, my business partner, she was doing a yoga teacher training in Hawaii. She had this, a download in her meditation to do yoga retreats. She texted me right away. She's like, let's do yoga retreats. I'm like, let's do it. We had no idea what we were doing. By the way, when we first initially launched this business, we're like, okay, I know how to plan the retreat. But I've never actually had gone on a retreat at that point. She had done a yoga teacher training at that point. But we were like, okay, let's start. Let's just put one together and see who comes. Nobody. But that didn't stop us. So I was like, okay, let me just take her to Sri Lanka, allow her to see, what Sri Lanka was about. And then we're like, okay, why don't we just do what we're good at? Instead of taking this as a failure, why don't we lean into our skill set? And I could, plan something in the back of my head in 30 seconds. And so we started our company as a retreat planning company where we would organize retreats for other business retreat companies that we wanted to be. So we're like, let's learn from them first. And we did. So 2017, 2018, we were learning. But 2018, we were like, okay, we still want to do our own, see how that feels, be part of this beautiful experience. And so in 2018, we did launch 3 of our first retreats under the ADzenTURE brand. And we did also have client retreats, about 12 or so, or maybe more client retreats. And then, when we had our first retreat, it was, of course, in Sri Lanka, and in March of 2018. At that moment, we just knew that was the moment. We, this is it. This is what it was. Creating, having these group of strangers come together and form such deep bond and connection over a span of a week. In doing these beautiful group activities, it doesn't take much to create community, and especially if you're really open to opening your heart out to each other and creating that space of non-judgment, and you really can walk away with such a beautiful group of humans that will support you to this day. And we still, from that first March 2018 retreat, have people that come with us every year. So
on that, because I mean, and I love that you kind of mentioned that, your first, like, you didn't know what you were doing, but you had heart, you had purpose, you had already kind of, as we talked about, the foundation was there for you to be bringing people together as a youth leader. Travel was something that you obviously aspired to. You worked in that field. So a lot of what you were kind of, I think, honing in on, maybe you didn't know it at the time, and the clues that the universe was giving you is just where are your natural gifts? Where do you light up, right? What shows up for you? And you may not need to have all the answers, but you need to just have that sense of purpose and passion.
Faith.
Exactly. So, and with that too, you said, you guys had failed the first time. And I think that's such an important message, because people could look at you and they could read your bio and see, wow, she has this global wellness company and they're doing it all around the world. And not many people hear about the ones where no one showed up, or the ones where you didn't make any money. And I think, especially in a culture where we just hear about the wins and we don't hear about the losses. I mean, a famous example is Starbucks. They were in the red for 7 years before they turned a profit, but we don't hear that in any of the marketing. So for you to be okay with failing, which I think itself is just an opportunity to do better, right? And then to have the faith to continue to move forward. But then a real life world event happened that put travel and travel companies to a halt. So enter in 2020, and everything that you've been doing, it's no longer conducive to do so. So talk to me a little bit about rebuilding, not only rebuilding ADzenTURE, but also having to rebuild yourself. You've ended a marriage, you've had, you said some sort of turning points. Talk to me a little bit about what rebuilding looked like for you, both personally and professionally.
Right, so 2019, just to backtrack really quickly, was the first really successful year for ADzenTURE. We had 19 retreats, which was unheard of. As a small business, mind you, it was literally just myself, my partner, my sister, who's our assistant, and it was just us running 19 retreats all around the world, from Iceland to Peru to Mexico, Costa Rica. We were just traveling Egypt. And so that point, yes, that was also when I left separated from my marriage, because it just wasn't working out for me, and I was in such trajectory of my own personal life, and something that really just was a wake-up call for me was that the one person that's meant to be as supportive was a person that was kind of pulling me back and keeping me from moving forward due to expectations. And I was like, I gotta be free. This little bird's gotta fly its wings. Yeah, right. So so I did. I left, and I left at my 30th birthday, and that was in 2019. I was in Egypt. It was beautiful. It wasn't, I was obviously grieving this marriage of 6 years, but I just knew at the time it was this is what I was meant to do. I was meant to walk away. I was meant to recreate myself. And then yes, 2020 freaking hit. Our business came to a halt. We're coming from the hospitality and travel industry, this has never happened. Never would the airports have shut down. Never had it shut down for anything. So I was like, no, it's no way possible. And I had, other networks in the industry, and they're like, no, it's not going to happen. It happened. So, life throws you lemons, as you can see constantly. And so you got to kind of keep adapting. At that point, of course, we just decided to take that break. We had to wait. We had to wait it out, have faith. I was even considering just taking another career, but it wasn't right for me. And we just waited it out, and thank God, 2021 came around, and we were seeing, okay, these vaccines were starting to get rolled out. People were starting to fly again. Airports were starting to open up again. So we were like, okay, well, where are our clients? Our clients were in the U.S., so let's do U.S.-based retreats. Let's bring these retreats to their home base. They still want to meet now more than ever after experiencing, that pandemic. Everyone wanted that to come together and feel that community once again. So it was so important for us to act quickly for these people. And so we did. We, started up our retreats again domestically in the U.S. And then once things finally, came around, we're like, all right, international, let's do it. So it was honestly just faith and believing in what we did. And our community believed in what we did. So they came back full support. Like, it was beautiful to see. So grateful, truly.
So, I mean, you've said this a few times, so I want to dive into it a little bit more. The word faith, having faith in yourself, having faith in your mission, having faith in your business. And, not every moment you're going to feel confident. You're, human just like the rest of us. And so as much as you have this light and this air of just, anything is possible, which is so beautiful. But in the moments where you didn't necessarily feel as confident to do so, or you didn't necessarily feel that you had to kind of tap into that faith, what are some things you would do for yourself to kind of help your own personal toolkit?
So in the middle of 2020, I found myself really stagnant. I was also going through another breakup. I found a boy post separation, and I was going through. He gave me hope, okay? He gave me hope. I know. He gave me hope, but it was right. It wasn't all that what it was cracked up to be. He painted this beautiful picture, and then I had to remember who I was. I actually, during that time, I forgot who I was. And something that actually really helped me to just feel my power again, I started Muay Thai. Shout out to Lisa. I remember our first class together at Bali MMA back in end of 2020 during the pandemic. And man, that changed it for me. Honestly, we always say movement is medicine. Movement is medicine. Do something different. If you're doing the same thing every day and you find yourself just stuck, do something different. Just change up your routine if you have to. Do things that are uncomfortable, because you're gonna find growth through that. You're gonna find some little shift. You're like, oh wow, I didn't think I could. I never thought I could. One was athletic, nor that I could, throw a kick or throw a punch. But look at me now. Go watch my videos. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But yeah, I mean. That was something that really got me out of a stuck place, and I felt that power and I felt energy from that, and I just kept it going. So that just became part of my new routine: meditation, Muay Thai, and through that I was able to really feel me in my cup, and that's every day. If there's nothing else, that is what I'm gonna do regardless.
So part of your, I guess, your personal toolkit to kind of just continue to remember who you are, to kind of get back to center, is movement. You mentioned meditation, and you've spoken a lot about how you just kind of knew you had to do this, or you knew you had to do that, and a lot of that sounds like you're just very in tune with who you are. And I think, the topic for tonight's episode was around living and leading authentically, is in order to, I think, do so, you have to have gone through and have that relationship with yourself. And I know we were laughing here as an audience about the two previous sort of pivotal relationships, but one might argue that unless you've had relationships with other people, those are sort of the testing grounds where you really learn about yourself. So what are some of the things that you learned for yourself, and things that you would carry forward coming out of those relationships with them and with yourself?
I learned how to love myself so much more than and to love myself and not seek it externally. So once I, broke up with that other ex-boyfriend, I went on this journey of self-love. I threw myself into books and podcasts and just getting to know myself better, because in partnership we only we know ourselves, but we get lost in the sauce. Let's be real. We get lost in the relationship, and it happens quite frequently unless you're really conscious of not allowing that to happen. And both times, I learned that I was a reflector in human design, and I was like, oh damn. I was really reflecting and mimicking each partner. And now I feel like, okay, I know this about myself. I know who I am. I know what I like. I know, different interests are mine, not another person's. But I took that year just to really get to know myself more, and that was the best thing. I was single, best thing I did, honestly, and it was profound. And now I feel like I'm unshakable. Like, even if, I do, hopefully have a partner soon. I'm calling a partner in, but, when and if that happens, like, I know not to lose myself. I know not to lose myself in that relationship.
I mean, it sounds like you're setting a standard for yourself, and thus you're kind of telling the universe more of what you want. And, yes, for all the men out there. Just kidding. Now we're a dating show. Who knew?
You got a whole new show.
But, I mean, again, so you've set this standard. And I think this is important just to kind of circle back and weave the story a little bit, is that this is all happening pretty much just before the age of 30, just soon after 30. So you've gone from living in Canada, living in Sri Lanka, corporate career, to launching a business, failing initially at that business, being married, being divorced, being in another relationship. All of this is happening in what many would call like your formative years in your 20s, and and kind of going through it. And so I asked this because you talked about, obviously business came to a halt in 2020, and then you kind of had to like rebuild, and that a lot of what was coming back was your community was coming back. Why would they come back? What have they said to you? What is it about, I guess, you and your founders, your co-founders, and ADzenTURE that you think differentiates you from all the other yoga and wellness companies? Because if people are coming back to you and you're holding space, or clearly something that you're doing differently. So I would love to understand what it is that you're imparting for yourself that you're then also doing for your participants.
Few things. So we run a seamless experience. Like, that is my expertise. So when it comes to operations, like, that is nip-packed. Like, there's no, it just runs effortlessly and in flow. I say in flow because although, yes, there's a schedule, for every retreat we say there's a schedule, but, we're going to flow and feel out your energy. It's not like a static retreat. Like, we're here to have fun. We're here to get to know each other and work on ourselves, whatever that means to them. So there's just such an openness that is created, and it also does come from, being hosts as well. Like, I'm who I am. I'm not going to pretend to be someone I'm not. And so I think that also allows everyone else to have that same comfort and just like open up, and they crack open, and just community forms. I like, it's magic. I don't know. But it's I think once you are able to be who you are, then others around you will pick up on that and also feel comfortable and safe to be who they are. So I think it's just like creating that space for community to come together just organically. Not forced, not like, this is what we're doing at 5 a.m. And, sometimes it does have to happen to keep things on time, but like, rest assured, like, it's still going to be, in flow of people's energies. So, yeah.
Actually, just on that, I want to just take a moment. We're kind of coming around like the halfway point. And what we love and what makes SpeakuP so special is that we have a live audience, which makes for engagement. It makes for, just a different dynamic and an opportunity to ask questions of our guests. So in a few moments, the mic will get passed around, and, we hope that you'll have some questions to ask of our wonderful guest and dive a bit deeper. So get those questions ready. So I think with that, I just want to kind of close the loop on. So you're kind of creating this container. What happens, or has it happened, where you are leading this group of people? It's one thing, as you said, to go from being a student leader and leading the communities there to then leading at a global level. And you're going to have your days where you may not feel like much of a leader, yet these people are coming to you for that guidance. How do you manage that?
I'm in service first. So, it's something that my parents also taught me, like, to be in service and how that looks like. I'm the last to eat. I know it's very like people pleasing of me, but that's what it is. I'm offering an experience and a service for people, and so I'm gonna put myself last at that point. But that said, like of course, I do have my little routines. I'll wake up before everyone else in the morning, nourish myself, whether it's through a mindful practice like meditation or something like that. Even just like waking up to set up the shala every morning, like I love it. Like it's just me being very just putting love into that room, and people feel it. At least I hope they do, or they tell me they do. But yeah, just like doing things honestly, truly with love, and with heart. Like everything that I do, I put so much of my heart and myself into. And I think that's really what resonates with people at the end of the day.
That sense of self-love that you're operating from, sometimes people have a tough time finding that within themselves. And so for someone who's watching who is trying to understand how to even fill their own cup in order to even give to others because you can't, what tips or guidance would you have for someone?
I was having once I was having a dark night of the soul, and I decided to write myself a love letter. And as cheesy as it sounds, it definitely works. It reminds you of who you are, of like all the great parts about you, and even the not so great parts that you might still be working on. Like it just reminds you that you are human, and like we all go through our shit. Like we're not perfect. We are, but regardless, like I think it's so important to know who you are so that other people's opinions don't matter. Like, even through the 2 relationships that, definitely hurt me and broke my heart, I'm like, that's on them. That was never on, because of who I was as a person. So I was able to really separate that. But again, it really does just get to know you is like the first step of like, even just like horoscope things. I love to dabble in a little bit of that, but just like little bits of that to like understand, okay, where are these patterns coming from? Like understanding where your behavior's coming from, your triggers, all of that, just really unpacking all of that. Helps to just love yourself and give yourself a bit more compassion,
Okay, at that point, because I have more questions, but I want to give the audience an opportunity, so we're going to switch it over here.
Yeah, so... wait for Guz. Yep, we on? Beautiful. Firstly, what a great guest. A round of applause, please. You're amazing.
Thank you.
Now, I have 2 questions. One, you know what it is, but I'll save that till the second one. And you know what it is as well. A little hint, date up Monday, right? So you know what the second question is going to be. But the first question is, so I didn't realize this was your beautiful sister here, right? Which I think is so special, right? Being able to work, when families are able to actually work together and get along and flourish, right? Is a no, I wouldn't call it rare, but it is an incredible thing. And for me, I think it's the most special thing you can actually do. Family working together is a whole nother level if you can do it well. So the first question is, what have been some of the most beautiful experiences? Maybe think of one that you've had working with your sister. And then because you're on the spot, what has been one of the challenges with working with your sister? On the spot. Hey, listen. On the spot. And you know what? You can get it back later on.
So we say it like it is, We have an interesting relationship. We like to say that we're more like brothers. Yeah. So we're always like, we'll argue quite often, like very frequently every day. But it's just like, it's the norm. It's not like, oh, I'm going to stay mad at you and never talk to you for a whole day. There's like never time doesn't pass in that sense. We're just like, we bicker, but that's it. I think one of my favorite moments of my sister, working together with my sister, was one of the retreats that we did after on our COVID comeback, we called it. We hosted a retreat in Sedona, and she's also a professional chef. So she came, and and cooked up an insane meal for all of our guests. My mom was also on that retreat, so it was really special to have both of them to like really see, the fruits of their her labor at least, and experience that firsthand. One of the challenges. So, now, I mean, it also goes both ways, right? So, like, sometimes I find myself being very impatient, and I have to remind myself that, she might not have the figure it out sense that I do. I'm like, figure it out, Dina. It's not always that easy. So I have to remember to just like be patient and allow her, one, the time and space to figure things out, but also kind of show her the ropes. So yeah, that's a challenge.
Great segue, and thank you thanks for being honest, which I knew you would be. So that leads to the second question of the Date Up Monday.
Okay.
Right? It's coming, Date Up Monday. Such a great name, SpeakuP Monday, Date Up Monday, same thing. So you mentioned, right, that working with your sister is about having understanding and compassion, right? So you're two different people, and it's understanding each other's differences, and not necessarily making allowances for them, but allowing each other to be themselves. And then where she shines, maybe areas where you don't quite have it, and vice versa. So part of the secret sauce, the magic sauce is that, right? Empathy, compassion in action, right? Okay. So bringing that forward, because I know there'll be guys watching this show saying, yeah, I reckon this Ousmand could be great.
Take a number.
Slightly differently. I know. I never said that. Right. So what do you think, could be the secret sauce for people watching? Because again, like we're in a time and in a place where people are going through different trials and tribulations in their marriages, in their relationships. The world has changed, not only with COVID and everything else, so on a slightly more serious level, like there have been major things happening with couples, relationships, and so on. So knowing all of these things and from your own experience, so what do you think, from maybe the potential future partner, but then also talking in a macro way, what do you think guys can do? Because you're a very headstrong woman, you know what you want, you've been through it, and you've got this sense of self. Mm-hmm. Which I'm sure some men would find a little bit confronting, right? So then knowing all of that stuff, like what is it then that you believe or you feel that men as a macro can bring to a relationship like that, which could also create that kind of, that source that you now have with your sister?
Do the work. I think often, and I'll tell you, Frank, quite honestly, my last two relationships, they didn't work because both my partners didn't want to do the work. They were afraid of meeting their ego, afraid of meeting themselves, and all the, just facing themselves. And it's normal, and even for us women, like we have to face all our dark shadows and our dark sides and parts, and it's not necessarily that we love all those parts, but we can learn to love them and have some compassion with them. And I think for the men listening, like do the work. And there are a lot of men that are doing this type of work, but getting to know themselves, knowing what their traumas are, knowing what their childhoods were, and again, like why are you behaving that way? Why are you acting that way? Just all of the patterning that we've had from society to really decondition all of that, because that's truly what it is.
So, pass on to somebody else. Yeah, you've got the mic up. So, anyone else? Question behind? Yep.
Thank you. So my question is, you can do different retreats or different like therapy or yoga, and all of them will be different because different people have different missions. Mm-hmm. So what's your mission that manifests through your retreats?
Honestly, it's very simple. To bring them to love and joy. just to bring everyone to that space of loving themselves, loving on each other. And it's kind of like the philosophy of the Balinese, right? So, and just really getting in touch with nature. That's why I really love Bali personally as well. But yeah, those parts, just really finding joy and love in every activity that we do, that, being so mindful in everything that we do and really being present in each other and in our surroundings, because we go to some spectacular places that just open you up, but you also have to open yourself up to receive all of that magic and goodness. So yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Hi. So I would love to know, when you're at your busiest, how many retreats did you say you were doing? Like 19?
Yeah, we did like 22 last year.
Wow.
24.
That's
My sister's
amazing.
saying 24, yeah.
Seeing as you're giving so much of yourself and you put yourself second at these retreats, how do you stay balanced when you're so busy and when you're giving so much of yourself to others?
That's a great question. And truth be told, I'm still trying to figure that out, because it's not easy. There are times, like this last year was, again, a big rebuild for us, so we just gave ourselves to our business. This year, we've given ourselves some time to breathe. Like, I haven't been on a retreat since November, or December rather. And I'll be going on one this week, actually. I'm going to Egypt. But, just giving that space and reminding ourselves that, we are the ones that are putting this pressure on ourselves too. Because, like last year, both my business partner and I were really like burnt out at one point. And we were like, okay, is this worth it? Like, we don't ever want to be doing this to come to a position like that. Because we are also in the wellness industry. Like, it just doesn't make sense to burn out doing, the things that we love to do, but it can really happen. So just really remembering to take that time to nourish ourselves. So yeah, I've had this beautiful time break in Bali thus far. So I'm like ready to go on, my first retreat of the year. So thank you.
Hi.
Hello.
I really loved your question, Rob, about relationships and how you make things work. And I hear what you're saying about men having to do the work. Yet, I also think that women have a responsibility to ask the right question to the partners that they choose. So if you could do it all over again, what would be 1, 2, or 3 questions that you would ask in order to make sure that you select the right person?
Great question. Excellent. I would really dig deep into their childhood, because most of our traumas are, they stem from childhood. I'll see if they have good relationships with their parents. Or if they don't, then are they working through that, or have they worked through that to, come to whatever peace they are with it? I think that's a big one, because that does come up in relationships, in partnership. Another question, yeah, do you go to therapy? Have you been to therapy? Like, are you open to therapy? Like, my ex was just a big no to that. And it's also just like, what is the big deal of opening yourself up to someone? And women, like, we tend to, just naturally speak to our girlfriends, and we're always talking to each other. But men, it's not so often that they feel comfortable, because they haven't learned that. Now there are more men's circles happening, and I see it in the work that I do as well. And like I have some really amazing friends that are doing the work, and are holding that space for more men to come and do that work too. So I think it's incredible where it's going, because yes, the sacred feminine is beautiful, but so is the sacred masculine if we get into that kind of lingo. But yeah, I think definitely questions on childhood. So hope that answers your question.
So one thing which I'll do real quick is, so some of you know that I've been relationship coaching for years, right? Yeah. I do it only for friends now, people that I love. But there's 3 things that I learned through a 20-year relationship and 3 one-year relationships that I realized the common denominator was me. After it was always just pointing outside, if only she was this, if only da-da-da-da. Then one day I realized the horrifying truth that, hey, mate, you're the only common denominator here, right? So there's something going on inside, not outside. So there's three things, 3 stages to any relationship. Can talk to me afterwards, I'm happy to share. The first one is called attraction. And attraction is where, everything is up, everything is attracted, yeah? And all the things that we do, the things that he does, she does, we love, and we talk for hours, and it's great, right? The next stage is called mud. And mud is where all of the unresolved instances from your past usually come up. And so if the relationship is like a triangle, one side is you, one side is your partner, the top is the relationship. And the idea is that the best parts of you and her move up to this other sacred container called a relationship. What happens is that's not what happens. The unresolved parts also move up there as well. So during that time is where, obviously, mud is the stage where everyone breaks up, right? In this stage. It's where power struggle comes in, ego, and all of these things that we know, the things that I love during attraction. It's disgusting. Why does he do that? What the heck, We used to talk for hours. Now we have different types of conversations, right? All of these things come up. But the key part to get through mud is self-acceptance and understanding. So if you can actually, each person can do that, that's when you get to the 3rd stage, which is called unconditional love. And that's another stage again. So it's interesting, the things that you mentioned before. And again, these things come up time and time again, but half of it is because people just don't know, right? If you know what the steps are or what the framework is, then you're able to pinpoint where you are and then able to make those choices consciously, right? You know what? Yeah, this is on me. So I feel that I need to do the work, and so on and so on and so on. But I'll stop it there because this show isn't about that. But so I'll pass it back to you, Bav. Yeah.
Oh, and there's one more.
Oh, one more.
I actually want to ask you, what do you envision for yourself right now in regards of personal growth, your company, and the hobby to be? We already know we are calling that one in. But yeah, we'd love to know where you're looking for.
So I always say that, all the work that I'm doing right now, it's for the legacy I'm leaving behind. And so, yes, I'm calling in partnership. I'm calling in motherhood. I'd love to be a mother one day. And in terms of growth, just really deep diving into more of spirituality, going on personal retreats, so not just like retreat on my own retreats, but going on other retreats with other, spiritual guides and things like that. So I really want to kind of unpack. I've been also on a deep dive into my ancestry. Through the work that I've been doing, through a lot of healing that I've been also taking part in on my retreats. So it's not that, people that come on my retreats, they're doing the work themselves. Like, I'm there doing the work with them, alongside them. But it's also been, really, really beautiful to be able to do that healing for my ancestors. And sometimes we carry this burden and we don't realize we do that as well. So yeah, just that's something that I'm diving deep into, because I also want to make sure that the legacy that I'm leaving behind, or my future children, understand where they come from. I think that's so important to have.
That's beautiful. And actually on that, so thank you guys for the great questions, because it definitely segues into what I want to kind of close out a little bit, because I know we're kind of coming up on that. And as we were saying earlier, this is a deep dive into a person, but you can't sum up a person in 1 hour. You can't sum up 33 years of life in 1 hour. So this is, everyone's getting bits and pieces of who you are and how you live, and ultimately how you lead, both professionally and personally. And we talked about, kind of going forward and leading going forward and going back. And you mentioned legacy, and you had touched on your ancestors and having Indonesian, Malaysian roots. So how does that play into the work that you do with yourself and are we doing forward? Like having discovered that and now trying to pay homage to it, I guess, to some degree.
I've been, seeking out different. Thankfully, we live in Bali, and there's quite a lot of priests here that can share information because of colonization. Unfortunately, history, a fact is that they erased history. They've erased books, and I can't trace my lineage, so I do have to kind of rely on this other alternative, which is spirituality, and maybe connecting the dots through that. And I've had an opportunity to do that not only in Bali, but I've also had an opportunity to do that in Peru, which is very, very strong spiritual portal to me. Not to get all woo-woo, but it is what it is. I love to say like Peru is medicine for your spirit. It's also like one of those places you truly have to just visit to understand like the magnitude of the energy that is there. But yeah, just also taking other people on that journey with me. Again, it's like the work that I do now, it's not just work for myself, but it's also, it can show up in other retreats that I am part of. Like, okay, I've done this, so I want someone else to experience this and have that breakthrough as well. So oftentimes, like, we'll curate a retreat that way as well. So, yeah.
What is then now, as a challenge, I guess, we've talked a lot about sort of you kind of overcoming and, sort of breaking sort of those cultural sort of norms and having supportive family and also then being that support of the community. But what's coming up for you now, like being both an entrepreneur, having a company, but it's a heart-led business. So I'd love to understand just a little bit about what that bridge is as an entrepreneur, but then also, it's very obvious you're making a social impact because you're working with humans on a retreat basis and holding space. But what would be some unique challenges you would say for an entrepreneur who is trying to create an offering of purpose?
Right. Heart first. Like, of course you want to make money, but heart first. When you lead with the heart and when you really have faith that everything will just align, the universe works that way. This is, again, it's based on my experience and it is tried and tested. Whenever I lead from the heart and I'm really doing things with purpose and with passion, like, I don't even check the weather on retreats. I truly don't. I'm like, it's going to be a great day, although the forecast might say it's, for rain on a day that we're going to the yacht, but things will clear out. Like, I kid you not, like, things like that have happened for me. So yeah, I think I think another challenge personally would be to really like find balance. That's something that I as I mentioned before, I struggle with because I can tend to sometimes be just consistently go, and just finding that time so that I'm nurturing myself, so that I can really lead from the heart and yeah, just operate from that perspective of heart and love, because that's really the world that I want to see, and so I'm going to operate from that sense as well.
That's beautiful. Okay, so we're going to close out here, and I know we talk about so many things, and we could have so many episodes, and you're such a multifaceted, layered individual that we could go into that. So I want to give you a moment to just gather any kind of final thoughts, and I just want to take a moment to thank, first and foremost, the audience. Thank you for being here. It definitely adds to the dynamic and just to have questions and faces. So thank you so much for taking time out of your day and sharing with us. And for those tuning in online, thank you for making us a part of it. And we hope that whether it's a snippet of a story, a buzzword, or even just facing a challenge and knowing that someone else has gone through a lot of these moments, that you're not alone. Also want to thank Robert. So for those of you who may know, Robert is the founder of SpeakuP Monday, and we are now over, I think, 350 plus episodes, 4 years running, rain or shine. So thank you, Robert, for creating a place for us to come every week and share stories that inspire and challenge and create dialogue. And thank you, Tropical Nomad, for allowing us the physical space to gather in and build community into the team. You guys are amazing.
And technical partner.
Yes. And our technical partner, absolutely, because we don't look like this without all these lights, ladies and gentlemen. And lastly, most importantly, I want to thank my beautiful friend and guest. You are such a beacon of love and light, and I think for anyone who is female, has gone through a marriage, a divorce, who is building a business, who is facing setbacks, who is trying to find themselves while also trying to give. I think there are just so many things that one can take away from just who you are. So thank you for sharing a little bit of your story and letting us get deep and vulnerable. And thank you for just gracing us here today.
Thank you for having me. It's been such an honor. Thank you.
So just before we close out, just, any sort of final words. I mean, I think if there's anything you wanted to impart to someone who maybe the 8-year-old version of Azma would be going through, what would you say to, the childhood version of yourself or someone else? And also, how can people find you and connect with you?
Okay, so to my 8-year-old self, trust. Like, really trust in yourself. Trust in your intuition. Don't put yourself in a box. Never put yourself in a box. Or never let anyone else put you in a box. Forget these labels, these identities. Like, you can be multifaceted, however that is to you. So, yes. Definitely that. And then you can find me on the gram. I share cute little motivational posts here and there. But yeah, you can find me on the gram. It's @withlove_Azma. So we'll share that, I think, on the links. Perfect. Thank you so much for having me, everyone. And thanks for coming out and supporting.